Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Old Friends, New Stories, brought to you by FreeMind Network. Today's guest is a guy I've known for over 2 decades, and somehow neither time nor distance nor hemispheres changed that connection. Dave's a big thinker, he's deep, he's a world traveler, he's a father, and yes, he also once had a full head of hair just like me. Dave's the host of the YouTube show produced at the FreeMind Network. He's a speaker, an operations leader, and most importantly, someone that I've always admired for how he sees the world through the lens of curiosity, clarity, and a healthy amount of skepticism. In this episode, we talk about everything from evolving media and digital culture to parenting in the AI age. We dive into how communication shifted, the illusion of choice in content, and what it means to be present in a world full of noise. This one's a conversation that's both personal and reflective, and if you've ever caught yourself wondering what the world is actually, whether it's changed or if we're just seeing it differently now, this episode's for you. So sit back, lean in, and let's get into it with my old friend, Dave Benson.
No, it's good, man. Hey, I put together some questions for today in advance. I kind of put a little bit of thought into what we were going to talk about.
Sure.
So, I will, I'll say it this way. I'm gonna try to find a way to dance like Fred Astaire around the politics and everything. But obviously, with our topic, I want it to be as real and honest as possible. To be honest with you, so I think you and I both, in talking about it, I think it's like, we both have worked in the media and communications for a long time now. I mean, you from a certain aspect of things. So I kind of want you in the beginning of this, from a career standpoint, to tell me what it is you do for a living, because I have no clue as far as that goes.
I'm Spider-Man.
So you can speak as general as possible. You don't have to name any companies or anything like that, but just kind of like conceptually what it is that you've been doing, because I know you're in communications and data and things like that. So
I'm in IT. So I'm in IT. I'm in a leadership role. I run operations and services for a company from an IT perspective. So that involves dealing with lots of teams, making sure they operate and work efficiently to deliver services through to our customers. So
that's perfect. Yeah. So this kind of, my questions are work out then. I just wanted to double check. I was pretty sure that's what it was that you were doing before. And like John and I recently, because that's what John has been doing his whole life as well with IT. And it's interesting how we're now, as we've worked together the past few months, seeing that, what I did with people networking and connecting people and building these businesses or for other people and brands and connecting people, it's all literally been the same thing, just one from a data and technology standpoint and the other from actual human connection and word of mouth and influence. Yeah. So some of the questions I kind of wrote up, some of them are going to sound silly coming from me, but I want to give full context for everybody there that you and I have known each other for 20 years. So I am going to ask you some questions that I already know the answer to, but I want to be able to tie it together for context for everybody else.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, when we first met, we both had a full head of hair. That's
I will in post-production slide that photo up here. Yeah. Actually, I think I could put the one up of I think John's in it, where it's like all of us on the curb at the Spring Garden House.
Yeah, and we got cigars in our mouth.
Yeah. So like, I want to talk a little bit about your perspective specifically, and I want to see, because you're more while we're both very open-minded people and free thinkers and things like that, we get along. We've known that in 20 years. When we first met, we knew immediately, like we hung out and we worked together, and then you came and stayed with us for a few weeks after that, and we've stayed in touch for 20 years remotely. But at the same time, our global scale, you've traveled a lot more than I have internationally and things like that. So I'm interested to know, you were born and raised in England and things like that. And you and I had met through the summer camp and then through Becky Lowe, and everything, and made that connection there. So when you've lived in the UK and the US and now you're in New Zealand, and how long have you been in New Zealand?
Since 2007.
What do you think? I mean, how much has it changed as far as the worldview from your perspective since then, let's say, being that you've had like 3 continents where even when you were in the US, you were there for a few months, but you were deeply in the US. Like you got the glimpse of what it was. And the fact that we worked in the summer camp was great because you got to see kids from rural areas, from urban areas, other international kids as well. You know, do you think that things have changed? Is it me and my perspective of the United States in that lens that it feels like everything has changed? I feel like a completely different person. I feel like the world is completely different. But is that only my lens, or does it also seem that way from your lens?
I think knowledge is a key factor here. So I'll throw the question back and say, let's go back to when we first met. We first met in 2003. So technology was not a big thing at all. We barely had text on cell phones, if that, and Snake was the best game that you could get. That's the limitations of what we were playing with. But your information was fed to you by what the newspapers or the news channels wanted you to hear. There was no different angle, maybe slightly different from the paper you read or the news channel that you viewed, but there was no different angle. So knowledge is power. We've evolved into a world where now we're fully assimilated, if you like. All of us are newsreaders. All of us are news bloggers. All of us have our own opinions on what's happening. The information we get is a lot more than we ever knew about. So were the things happening from whatever standpoint, political or any other, in 2003 that are happening today? Yes. Did you know about them? Probably not. So your opinion and perspective wouldn't have been able to be fully formed because your knowledge of it was limited. The world is always going to evolve and change. It's how we evolve and change with it. But I think now we've got more knowledge and information as to how the world actually fits together, rather than this pseudonym that we used to live in. And when you'd look at movie stars, another great example with the Me Too movements and all of that, that came from people being brave to speak out. That came from information being shared and various other things. It was happening for hundreds of years before then from the wealthy and the leaders. It's not that it never happened. It's just that we didn't have the right abilities to either raise it or communicate against it.
No, it's a really good point. And I think it's let's look at it as a 20-year block, because that's what it is. And when in that 20-year block, it was really the beginning stages. You're right. It was only AOL. It wasn't, we were it took 24 hours to download a movie. If you just wanted to steal it offline, songs and things like that would just jam your whole hard drive up. So you're right. It was the ease of the flow and the ease of the information. And then from your perspective as well, does it seem like over here, it seems like, and this is a bit of a generalistic statement, but there's a larger portion of our society that has seemed to numb themselves down to, they did not necessarily branch out to the trust yet verify, and then it really much went to the just trust part. And it wasn't, the verifications and the further knowledge didn't go beyond the headlines for a large portion of our society. And is that the same from your lens as far as what you've seen over the past 20 years as well internationally?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think people love to believe in what they see and what they read wherever it is, and the trust comes from that. And especially if you decide to go a certain way with your politics and you start to research and read a certain way with your politics, then every feed that you get and every opinion you see is going to be tailored to what you're interested in. That's just the way the analytics work. That's just the way it's built. So that just reinforces exactly what your beliefs are and what you're forged, and your trust in that just continues from there. It's interesting. One of the I was on a plane the other day, and I saw on Netflix that they had a new documentary. It was a Jerry Springer documentary based on his show. So I watched it, and I thought to myself as I was watching it, has anything changed? The same sort of question. These people were around in the 90s, in the 80s, doing ridiculous things, marrying horses and whatever it may be. It's always happened. Again, it was just our visibility was never there a bit. And now we choose what content and information is fed to us and what we believe is truth. And it was there. It was always there. It's just how we choose it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember even it was like right before you and I had met. So probably 2000 to 2003, let's say. I was in high school, and I remember we didn't have cable when I was growing up. Like we had just 5 or 6 channels and things like that. We didn't have the extensive thing that exists today, or even back then. But then what my parents had was this remote. And we think about today how we're tracked online and how every keystroke is tracked and everything like that. But my parents had a remote control that was like you got a credit on your cable company if you use this remote versus the other one, because that remote had a chip in it. And what they were doing was they were testing how long you're watching certain channels. And I think about how manual that process must have been, like collecting that data and then and putting it all together. And I can't even imagine what the technology was that was sending the data out, like how long it took to receive that info.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how all the channels were fed back then. You know, it was the amount of views and the amount of that's how they determined what a show was successful or not, and whether it stayed or went. Nowadays, it's so subjective, and if it doesn't work on one platform, it doesn't mean to say it won't work on another platform. So.
That's interesting the way you say that about platforms, because it's that idea that all of this has always existed. And I appreciate the way you put all that together, because it always did exist. And what's happening is the media and the cultural landscape is like a multi-piston engine, and they're always running. But it just seems like every once in a while, one gets to pop up and gets a little bit more surface area than the rest of them. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, as far as who gets the platform, it's irrelevant because of the cyclicalness of what goes on.
Yes. Yeah. And if you look at your current president, whichever lens people put on your current president, he communicates, truth or not, a lot more than ever before. No president in history has ever been on Twitter every day, or whatever the platform is now, or Truth Social, whichever one he uses. No one ever has done that and said their opinions, right or wrong, out to the public. So now you've got a new lens of people who are absorbing information from the chief and commander to do as they will with. It's fascinating to see. We saw it in 2016. It's prolific. It's only been 10 days or something like that.
I appreciate you putting it in that lens, because it's irrelevant of what your political opinion is of him. When it comes to just strictly communication, he understands the media. He understands how to hit those fires and hit those pistons. And I think it's really interesting that something that is not talked about publicly in the U.S., but I know is talked about other places, is the fact that even the media that doesn't agree with him as far as branding and as far as mission goes, they all know the benefit of the ad revenue of what the viewers are when they log in. And I know, back, even before he had become president, leading up to that, there was a lot of audio tapes and interviews where everybody spoke about it very openly. And it's funny that, I'm not saying it's no conspiracy at all. It's just in their interviews leading up to it, they interview like NBC and CBS, and they're so giddy, these executives, because they're just excited. They have no idea what's coming. They're just excited about the views and the ad dollars, and how their viewership skyrockets every time that he gets on camera, or every time his voice is on there. And I think that, again, regardless of any political factor, just being somebody who I went to college for corporate communications and public relations. I mean, I have a degree in this, and I've been following it and lived it my entire life. And he is a fascinating specimen when it comes to understanding every aspect of that, even to the point of the repetition. And a lot of people understand the repetition, and they're like, oh, he's dumb, he's stupid, he just repeats himself over and over again. It's like, it's not that. It's the brand sensory experience that he's putting in there. It's the phrasing that gets repeated, because the more it's repeated and the more it's real in your mind. And I think that that's the number one thing, that people just aren't Googling things enough anymore. They're just trusting their news feeds, and they're not reading the articles completely. And I'm not saying it would change your opinion. It's just the fact is, knowing that your attention is triggered based on very superficial impulses.
Yeah, we don't have all of the information. Someone told me, and I don't know if this is true or not, so I'll just put that disclaimer out there to start with. Someone told me the other day, the change of name from the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Everyone's been talking about it, joking about it. Why do we need to do it? Is it just claiming it? What's the purpose of this? And the person I was speaking to said, did you know that in the Gulf of Mexico, they have restricted research and development and digging for any form of oil or resources. There's the Paris Accord or whomever have put such sanctions on it that in order to do it, you would have to unwind years, and no one could do it within their term. However, if you change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, all of a sudden, those rules and regulations no longer apply. The permits are as stated as the Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf of America. And all of a sudden, the doorways are opened for any company to go in and start applying for permits to do the research and development, start digging again. So whilst people thought, well, this is ridiculous, why wouldn't we do it? There's a lot of people who've been looking at this in another way and saying, well, the reason you do it is because it makes money. It opens up the oil again.
It's interesting to hear you also say that it's always been there, because for those people that aren't pattern followers and media consumers, but with discernment, like with actual discernment of the media, not just sitting here and absorbing the algorithm, watching the algorithm, seeing the patterns, what are they pushing, what are they, it's all very obvious, at least from our lens and our media. And I'm sure you have your own thing over there that's pretty similar as well. But what people don't understand is how quickly how public opinion outweighs sometimes actual law and order. Because if you get enough people to believe something, it doesn't matter what the laws are if the populace is on board.
Yeah.
And that's the most frightening thing, because that could be for positive and it could be used for negative.
Yeah. If I was to say to you now, name me 10 world leaders, could you do it?
Probably, but they're all going to be dictators,
But the one that anyone will say to you is Trump.
Yeah. I mean, oh, yeah. Now, as far as now and for the next 100, 200, 300 years, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, he wants a legacy, and he's definitely making one for himself. Again, right or wrong, I'm saying well out of the American politics as to my beliefs in this, but right or wrong, he's making a legacy, and he's on the front of everyone's mind every day, every newspaper, everywhere you go. Trump, like that's one thing he's doing.
And I think a lot of people also need to realize that this is not impulsive. None of his decisions are impulsive. Everything has been so thought out, and it's been a decade or more in the making from a lot of different influences, and that alone is powerful, because it's not like something, while sometimes the distribution and the grammar is always messed up and stuff like that, the intent and the mission is just concrete, and it's fundamental. And I think now, again, not even an opinion of it, just looking at it from the lens of in here, it's now become a fundamental principle in people's life, and it's become also that part of theology that gets a little scary, where when it becomes a fundamental part of you via your theology and your actual core beliefs, that's where it's changed now. It's really evolved from just being something that people are fans of a celebrity or a popular person, to now it's a core belief and a core principle for people's lives. So it's definitely a dramatic evolution over the past 10 to 20 years of that.
Yes. Yeah, I fully agree.
What, kind of like as a husband and a father, how do you talk to your kids about not necessarily not politics or anything like that, just about media discernment, let's say? Like they have phones, they have iPads or whatever around them and stuff like that, or not. Yeah.
They don't. So my kids are 6 and 9. I live in a beach resort area of New Zealand. We love to spend time outdoors. We do a lot of things. They're aware of politics at a certain level. We definitely educate them. We try not to just put our beliefs on them. We try to give them the facts and see what decisions they can come up with and what ideas they have themselves. But in terms of social media and things like that, they are not on it at all. They're not a part of it. They're not being fed any information. It will come, and we're trying to work out. I don't know if I've got the answer for that. I don't know if anyone does. We all came into this in the last 10 years, and it's been thrown on us, and no one knows what to do with it. On top of that, we've now got AI thrown at us, and we don't know what to do with it. There's companies who are scrambling to build strategies and understand how we can use and develop and work with this. But in terms of my family and my children, I'm very happy they're a step away from it right now. It scares me as to what will happen when we do embark on that. There'll be a lot of hand-holding from me. There'll be a lot of education. There'll be a lot of walk and talk throughs and trying to help them to understand what information they're getting, whether it's right, whether it's wrong, whether they should believe it or whether they should do more research to find their own facts out. But I think the key thing is to equip them with the tools and the knowledge to be able to do that rather than to let them follow off into a certain path. The scariest thing for me is AI and cyberbullying. AI from the perspective of how do we teach our children anymore? What do we teach our children anymore? And should we teach them to be researchers of information rather than to be holders of information, which is what we've always been? I don't know. And then cyberbullying, that scares the bejeebers out of me, and I don't even know what to do with that yet. So
it was like, my kids are 13 and 14, so we've been in the heat of it for a little while now, but there's really no answer because it's constant. Every time you come up with some sort of guideline or platform, it evolves and it changes immediately. And I don't say that in the way of like throw your hands in the air and don't care about it, but it's just such a fast evolution. The only positive when it comes to the AI part, now two parts of this, the bullying is separate from what I'm about to say, but the AI part from a visual as well as like communication standpoint. I was talking to my kids last weekend. We were at the volleyball tournament and we were talking about AI as far as social media goes. And it seems like they have a little bit, at least from my experience of talking to them, a little bit of a better eye as far as visually what's AI than I do sometimes. And then also from a language standpoint, they catch it a little bit. They catch some of this stuff faster than I do, which because of the fact they've grown up with it, their natural language is digital. So it would make sense that they would see those differential patterns a little faster. On the other side of it, I fully agree. And it's something that is not talked about enough that the cyberbullying, like there's not, I mean, I hate to be like fear mongering, but it's like we've only dealt with little civil wars and battles when it comes to cyberbullying. This is an apocalypse. I mean, it's if it were to turn into, it's not hard to do. Like I look at it from a sales standpoint. Like I use AI on my outbound cold, just pulsation touches. If you literally just did that in a negative sense, I mean, that's thousands of messages a day that I could send out with a very minimal software package and that's just so frightening. And I honestly didn't even think about that until you just said it. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. So if you think of how we evolve as humans, we always go through eras. We've been through the industrial evolution. And that kind of passed because we've found that robots can do the work that we used to do during the industrial evolution. So we've managed to outsource a lot of that work. Not all of it, but a lot of it. What is the digital evolution? And at what point do we step off? So I'm a firm believer that the cell phones we look at and terrifyingly, if you go anywhere, you'll see everyone just staring at a screen. That's safe. It's a comfort. It's something they sure can get information, but it's a distraction. At what point do we step off that, and what's the next stage, and how does that happen? I believe in 100 years, no one will be looking at a phone. I don't know what they'll be doing as to how that information's being given to them, or the endorphins are being satisfied. But I don't.
It'll be in our brain. It'll be Neuralink.
Yes, the chip will be implanted. But I think it's a phase, and I think people will look back in time in history and say, "Man, there was a whole era when people did nothing more." And there'll be photos of people just looking at their phones, and it's scary. I do it. Everyone does it. It's just one of those horrific things.
It's funny, like I was joking around with somebody the other day that people that sell billboards, like the big flat 2-dimensional billboards, there was a time where you used to be able to be like, oh yeah, I can gauge how many people will see based on the traffic of cars. And it's like now like 90% of people, they're not even looking at the road, let alone the billboard that's on the side of it. Like, what do you think? Like we've been in touch sporadically throughout the course of the time. Like when you think about like social influences and things like that, do you think that things are dramatically different from like, let's say in the United States from your impression as far as and in New Zealand? Or do you think that everybody's kind of evolving the same way with technology and media? It's just scaled a little bit differently based on population sizes.
Hey creators, founders, and dreamers, the FreeMind Network is brought to you by Cowabunga Johnny, where nostalgia meets creativity. Cowabunga Johnny creates custom cards that are perfect for personal keepsakes, team recognition, or even promotional items. These cards pop with personality and make an unforgettable impact. But that's not all. Cowabunga Johnny also crafts larger-than-life murals and nostalgic pop culture-inspired art. It's about connecting with your audience through bold, memorable visuals. Want to learn more? Visit cowabungajohnny.com and see how he's turning memories into art that connects. Let's create something amazing together.
Yeah, I think it is scaled on population sizes. I think it's largely the same across the board from what I've seen. So I spend a lot of time in the UK, obviously, Australia. I've spent time in Asia and the US, and I think it's largely the same across the board. And I think it's access to the same content across the board as well. So it was interesting. There was an influencer from YouTube who came over to New Zealand. He arrived in Auckland, and there was the biggest fanfare around this person. I'd never heard of them for what they do, but it was, it wasn't an A-list celebrity, but they were attracting the attention on the news and media, just like an A-list celebrity. It was fascinating to me, but they are the celebrities. I mean, that's the modern celebrity that we need to start being more aware of, rather than the big movie stars. But in answer to your question, I think it's the same around the globe. I think we've all evolved in the same way. Some people's technology has taken a slower turn to get to where it needs to, but largely now, any country you go to, everyone's holding the same device, everyone's looking at the same content.
So you think that like your philosophy with the kids, like having them wait a little bit longer, you think that's a common, or do you think you're an outlier with that one? Or are kids is it kind of the same there where kids are getting them very early?
It's a bit of a mix, and I think it depends on where you are. So I know some people who live in colder climates, who everyone refers to it as screen time for the kids, let's face it. So in colder climates where they give their kids more screen time, and that's understandable for the limitations that they have. They can't go outdoors as much, and they want to keep them engaged and entertained, so they utilize screen time a little bit more. In New Zealand, it's mixed bag. It's parental preference. It's what they want to do. I'm just more of an outdoors type of person. I enjoy that kind of aspect. And personally, I know that my kids are going to have teenage years where they're going to do nothing more than tune into devices and whatever else. So I want to give them the ability now to focus on other things, but not limit them to not see it. They still have screen time. It's not a forbidden fruit that I want them drawn to immediately, but it's parental preference. I don't know if there's one set way of looking at that.
When you look at different things from a technology standpoint, what are some analog type things that you wish were still common practice, where you're like, this is still something that is foundational, and not one of those I'm an old man yelling from the porch, get off my lawn, I mean, like, where you're like, that's something that will try the test of time.
Cars, motorbikes, I ride a motorbike, I drive cars. Technology's great, but I just miss the old fashioned, get in your car, turn the key and enjoy it, rather than have it steering for me and doing everything else. That's personal preference. Cell phones, the screen time, I would love to go back to a time where your phone texts and it called and you can stay in contact, but you're not looking at it for any particular reason. It's just a communication device, a safety net. TVs, get rid of some of the streaming and just go back to, you've got so many channels that win, lose, or draw.
The other day I was talking with somebody and I said about the phone, I was like, I do want to buy that. I just want to have a flip phone or whatever and just be done with it. And then I thought about it and I was like, but it's tough, because if you do, it doesn't matter, because everybody's still going to communicate all these other ways. So like, because everybody now has adapted their own platforms of communication where like some people only communicate over Facebook Messenger. Some people only communicate over email. Some people like only communicate over TikTok. And it's like, it's so weird how we are kind of chained. We're chained to what it is now. If we want to choose to be available to certain people, like I do my own thing where I'll disappear into the woods into a cabin for a few days and check out. But to change that as an entire lifestyle, it saddens me that that's not a reality. That it's not an opportunity.
Yeah, look. There's been a lot of good things. I mean, whichever dating website you use, Tinder, Grindr, whatever you're into, I think that's fantastic because that's opening people up to meeting people that they never would have before. There's pros and cons. I don't necessarily believe you should swipe someone away, but it does. It's opened doors to new things. But then again, on the negative side, has it stopped us talking? Has it stopped us going out as much? I think COVID's been the biggest killer. Any city I go to these days, whether it be from an office perspective or a pub or a bar perspective, it's changed in the way you don't see as many people out anymore. People aren't out spending as much anymore because, it's easier to be indoors and they still get the communications with people. And, I think a society has evolved slightly.
There was an interesting article in a magazine over here called The Atlantic. And it was I think it dropped today or yesterday. It's called The Antisocial America. And it's talking about over the past 20, 30 years, how we, even more back to the 60s and the 50s. Actually, it goes back to when the TV was introduced. And when the TV was introduced, people all of a sudden stopped going out a little compared to what it was before to then. Then they were at home a little bit more. And then all of a sudden food deliveries started to happen. And then milk got delivered and bread and then groceries got delivered. And how we've just slowly over the past 50, 2 to 3 generations, we've really just become an isolated population. And then where it gets really deep and sad in a way, but also beautiful in a way, is the duality of, let's say, 2 people who are completely isolated and have no friends or anything like that, but they're able to connect on social media and feel connected, yet when the screen turns off, they're alone in their home. And sometimes it's like that with creators. Like there's creators online on YouTube and things like that do these shoots by themselves and they turn off all the lights after they're done their live streams and there's nobody in the house, and they're just alone. And one of those things where there's 2 parts to it where you want to feel bad for those 2 people, but also not, because 50 years ago or 20 years ago, those 2 isolated people, if that's the type of personality they have to be isolated and want to be alone, but also feel lonely, that's something where they would have never had an opportunity to connect with somebody before. So there's good and bad in the duality of that.
Yeah, I laugh when you talk about the content creators, because obviously I've got the YouTube show, and the YouTube show is like a talk show. So you've got a monologue. When you do a monologue, the biggest thing you can ever work off is audience feedback and their participation. And I've done a lot of speaking in my time, and I love speaking in front of people. But with this, they're imaginary people, so to speak. So yeah, it's very, very hard, and the cameras go off and I'm alone, but it's very hard to work out comedy and cues and be able to do that with nothing. But it's just
that's something a lot of people don't realize, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I was just thinking about it from an isolationist kind of antisocial standpoint, but you're right. Like these guys that are really funny, like on their YouTubes or whatever else, on their TikToks or their Instagrams, like the ones that are alone, that is even more impressive now. I don't think I could put that. I don't think I put that perspective on that. It is pretty hard to be genuinely. That's why a lot of stand-up comedians didn't survive during COVID, because they weren't able to create some of that stuff. What I find interesting is this is gonna upset certain people, and I'm big in the stand-up comedy world. But I found that since the pandemic, the comedy popularity, the type of comedy shifted to really authentic, real stories, like as opposed to canned lines that people were writing up and repeating for 30 shows across the country. And I think that's been interesting because it also go back to what you're saying about celebrities and actresses and actors and things like that. They didn't survive sometimes the pandemic because they didn't have anything to talk about sometimes, because they didn't have life experience outside of the set. And I think that really, talk about multiple pistons firing, it's like the ones that kind of really have the attention, which is the most valuable thing today of the consumer and the audience and the public. It's really the genuine and authentic people that have something to talk about of substance.
Yeah. If you do anything that's comedic, and you probably have to do it a couple of times to get it right, try editing yourself and then judging how funny you are with no one else be able to do it. That's a hard one.
It's the other day I was talking to John, and we or the other week, and it was about people are always talking online, and they're like, what's up with all the best podcasters or comedians in the United States and stuff, and it's like, it makes sense because podcast is all about being introspective as well as being observant and being present. And that's what, in order to be a good comedian, you have to be constantly observing what's going on, because you want to follow the trends. You want to know what's going on. You want to make sure you're understanding human interaction. So when you're in front of a crowd, you know what to expect. You're following the politics for the same reason. You're following culture. And it's like, they're literally the naturally just sponges. So it makes sense that they then would be in that space of open-mindedness and conversation.
Yeah, you just reminded me. So I read the other day that the White House is now opening up its media to podcasters, YouTubers for the newsroom that they've never done before.
Yeah, I saw they have like 5,000 applicants yesterday or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about controlling your narrative and your message in a way. So if they select people which are going to tell the story in the way they want it to be told, which they will hand select, these podcasters or YouTubers, and be able to see their content and see which way they kind of go politically, then now their message is being told in the way they want it to be, rather than Bob at News Channel 3, who might have said, well, I don't like you, so I'm going to ask the real hard questions. No more real hard questions, just questions which will guide the conversation and give the narrative that you want out there. Fascinating.
It is. And there's the two pieces I see of it is like recently there was an interview about investigative journalists and TikTokers and YouTubers and all this stuff, and the guys that are doing the breaking news, and they're breaking things down every few seconds, and then the upheaval from the traditional journalists is they didn't go to journalism school, they have no code of ethics, all these other things. And while actually I see a small merit in that argument, only from the morality and ethics. And I don't mean this from a purist standpoint. I just mean, like when I was 20 some years old, I was very impressionable when I was in rooms with very high powered people. And I was, I own all of my responsibilities, my accountability of my actions that I took in my 20s. But I also was put into rooms where things were impressionable. And sometimes I was gullible, or sometimes I was impressed to the point where I believed something that I might not have always believed. But I was like, well, he's a higher person than me in life, so I might start. I think I need to believe that as well. That's that thing that makes me nervous, though, about them, only because they don't have a. Some of them don't have an advisors. They don't have partners. They don't have people they can talk to. And if you're in there and all of a sudden you don't have anybody else to bounce ideas off of, and you go into this room that no matter who's in power, as far as the party goes, it's a manipulation room. I mean, the press pool is just, it's your one shot to shoot and fish in a barrel to manipulate the narrative of the entire country. So there's a lot of pressure when you're inside that room. And I just think about myself. I'm like, think about little boardrooms I was in my 20s and early 30s, but to be in that place, and then like that's where I get a little nervous for some of them. Not that I think they're going to take advantage of the situation or blow up the world, but I think I got fear for them as far as individuals that might lose themselves in that moment and in that experience. So I hope the best for all of them. I hope the best for all of them. I just think that caution and the trust yet verify is going to be so crucial with that type of situation, because they might not have the toolbook of discernment when it comes to being handed propaganda directly. And again, propaganda is handed out on both sides of the party, so it's not. This is not us talking about a specific administration by any means. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting place that we're in. I think I agree that it's now more important than ever that people do the research, and I think that people need to understand that it scares me sometimes to know that people don't do the research.
Well, research is interesting. So where do you research if you want to find information? And then how do you know that the information you're finding is actually true? One of my favorite things that someone once said was someone made up a word. I can't remember what word it was, and they made up a word. And the person turned around to them and said, "You just made that word up. Oh, that's made up." And the person turned to them and said, "Every word's made up." And they were so right.
All it is the scale of adoption.
Yes.
So I mean, you and I could create a phrase right now, and if we made it viral, next week we could copyright it and it'd be in the dictionary next year.
Yeah, and who defines the dictionary? I've seen some documentaries on this, and the people who define it, I know better than anyone else. They're just like, okay, yeah, well, I agree that word should be in there. Okay, well, that's a new word then. So, but what gives them the?
That's a whole nother thing. You know what I mean? Because then you look at because even you think about it, like if you watch old movies and you watch old movies and you read older books. And even a generation or two back, when you read an older book, even from 50, 60, 70 years ago, the entire prose is different.
Yes.
And that's so not scary or anything like that, but it's something that we don't think about because it evolves so fast that it's not a abrupt thing where it's like, now we're going to use this. We're no longer going to say hereunto. We're going to say therefore, and it's like, those things are just so naturally flowed into the stitching of it, and it becomes like you said, it's that mass adoption becomes reality.
Yeah. So I don't know what research is anymore. I know we can go back to foundation science and facts, which we can rely on, but in terms of research of other things, I don't know. I mean, if someone said, "Have you researched that?" They're like, "Yeah, I've checked that," and for a fact they've typed it into Google. And 6 stories on Google, which are at the top, confirm that is true. And they're like,
all sponsored ads. Yeah.
This. And, they're not. They've just been fed whatever Google tells them. Is Google our research tool?
And then again, it goes to where somebody could say, "Oh, well, that's where AI is going to come in," and it's like AI is going to come in, but some human with bias is controlling AI. You know what I mean? If we're gonna admit AI is not controlled with any bias, then AI itself would be sentient and conscious, and we don't want that,
Well, someone said the other week that AI has got about 5 years until it gets some form of consciousness, and I
would actually think it was less than that, to be honest with you.
That's a scary thought.
It's funny that we bonded when we first met over, RoboCop and Schwarzenegger and Terminator and everything like that. And here we are literally living those damn movies.
Yeah, it's scary. But that's the world. We knew it was coming. We knew back then. Everyone was always predicting a future of this. It's just taken longer to get here than we ever anticipated, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Back to the Future had this happening in 2008 or something like that. So what was it? Flying cars were in the early 2000s, I think, as far as Back to the Future goes.
I think they were 2016 Back to the Future.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. And then I go back to like Robert Heinlein books that my grandfather had me reading, like with Fahrenheit 451 and all this other stuff. And it's like especially Robert Heinlein. I mean, he created the iPad in the 50s on a space shuttle in one of his books. And it's like it existed, but it existed 50 or 40 years later,
Yeah, and it's exponential growth. That always happens when you build something and you make something. The person doesn't have to start from scratch anymore. They start from the building block of what you've created, and they develop on that. And things move faster, and we've seen that in the last 20 years at least of development.
We saw that in the last 4 days with DeepSeek. I mean, I've never seen anything like hold my beer scenarios than that thing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But no, I appreciate you taking the time today to talk through this stuff. I know it's a lot of people. Not a lot of people. I mean, people get upset, people get nervous, people get scared, and I'm not trying to like put any narrative together that we should throw our heads in the sand like emus and just pretend nothing's going on. But I appreciate that authentically, like without knowing what I was going to ask you, we already were on the same page, which is also why we've been connected for 20 years. Is it's always been here. It's going to continue to evolve and grow. It'll expedite with mass adoption. Now there is the gray area of with AI that, like you said, compounding growth with AI is going to be by the second now instead of by the day or by the minute. But at the same time, the underlying factor is just keep your eyes open and keep understanding what's going on, trusting intuition, trusting experience, and not realizing that anything else has changed. But sometimes the distractions and confusion will be greater.
Yes. Yeah, I would definitely, my advice to anyone is, don't fear technology. Don't steer away from AI or anything like that. Do research. Find out what you can get from it. Find out its best benefits for you personally, and make sure that you use it to its full advantage for that. My other advice, which I only really in the last few years started to work out in myself, is stop being distracted and start being present, and live in the present. And, you know, I try more and more to realize that the time I get with my family and with my friends, it just goes by so fast. And I need to appreciate what's happening around me more and be present with them rather than looking at my phone or planning something for the future. There's time to do that at other times. The time right now is just to focus on what I've got and who's around me, because that's not going to be the case forever.
No, that's really powerful right there. I am in the opposite end of parenting, so I'm in the less than 5 years until they're done high school. So I'm on the tail end of the panic of I only have so much time. So that was, you know, that hits home for me. So Dave, I appreciate it all the time, man. Real quick, everybody, check out the YouTube show on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and Facebook, and all that jazz. And Dave is interviewing tons of awesome people, both locally in his area as well as other creators and influencers and stuff like that in the media space. So all this is very relative to what Dave's doing. So make sure you check him out.
Awesome. Love you, buddy. Thank you for the conversation.
Absolutely. Love you too, man. You have a good day.
You too. Bye.